Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Kusum Wijetilleke. My guest today is one of Sri Lanka's most senior journalists, Mr. Ameen Izzadeen. He's the deputy editor of the Sunday Times. Mr. Izzadeen, thank you very much for being on Insight.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, Mr. Izzadeen, we are here to have a conversation about one of the main conflicts in the world today, which is the Israeli Palestinian conflict. You've had a long history of writing about this, reporting on this. As a journalist, you've written countless articles about it. And I think you're part of a group of voices in Sri Lanka that has always shown steadfast solidarity with the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. I just for our viewers, will you give us an update on what is the latest in the Gaza Strip? What is the situation with Israel? Any potential for a ceasefire, that sort of thing?
Well, at the moment, as it's happening now, the Israeli troops have raided the Al Shifa hospital, the biggest hospital in the Gaza Strip, and they are going into the hospital looking for Hamas militants. They believe there are Hamas tunnels under the hospital, and though the doctors and Hamas and the Palestinian voices have rejected this claim, uh, there's no evidence to prove that there are Hamas commands or Hamas centers or Hamas weapons stacked underneath the hospital. So it's so just they have moved into, because they think this Hamas is the Israelis are thinking Hamas using hospitals and civilian facilities and they are using civilians as a human shield to protect themselves and attack Israel. So, but the hospital officials are denying this. So this is the conflict going on, and in the meantime, the situation in the general in the Gaza Strip is very, very dire. People are starving. People are starving. People are dying without medicine, without fuel. The ICRC has stopped. Most ICRC operations have come to a virtual standstill, and the UNRWA, or UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency, it says it has only fuel for 1 or 2 days. Otherwise, the once it is, because they need fuel to move their operations. They are running a lot of civilian facilities, like for instance the water desalination plants. It needs fuel, it needs power. So if you don't have fuel and power, virtually it comes. Already people are drinking undrinkable water. It is one very unhygienically unsuitable water. That's what they are drinking. And there are a lot of, like for instance, it's so heartbreaking to learn that in one particular place there are about 50,000 people. They have only 4 toilets, and these toilets are spilling over, and the sewage is on the road. So it's these things, when we see, the smell doesn't come to us, the odor. So it's but people who live there, they live in hell virtually. It's a hell on earth. So that's the situation. So it's very, very pathetic and heartbreaking to know that the situation is becoming worse by every minute.
It's almost
Yeah.
unthinkable because and the other side of it is that there is a propaganda war that's
Yeah.
parallelly going on. Part of the problem, which I will discuss it a little later on, but one part that you just touched on, that when there's information that comes from the Gaza Strip, now for one thing, the Israeli government isn't allowing for independent journalists to enter the Gaza Strip and enter the war zone. In that case, they also always tend to create some doubts about the information that comes from the Gaza Strip, because I suppose the conversation is about the people working in the Gaza being pro-Hamas, and therefore that they themselves are feeding propaganda, and that we have to filter out that propaganda. That's sort of the conversation that's being had. It's very important to state for the audience's sake as well, because this is the same thing that's happening with the casualty count. Now, currently it's, what is it, 12,000?
It's about almost 12,000.
12,000.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that casualty count, they say this is also from the Palestinian Health Ministry, which
Yeah.
is technically controlled by Hamas.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to make clear is that even in previous conflicts, like in 2014, the Hamas Medical Association's numbers and the later numbers that the United Nations counted, there are only very small differences. So I think there was about 100 or 150 difference, but the total dead was between 4,000 and 4,200. So even then, we can see in the past that what information the Palestinian or the Gazan authorities have given has been quite close to the reality. So could you address this idea that we can't trust the data that's coming from the Gazan government and the Gazan authorities?
No, I do believe, because going by the ground reality, going by the past, as you said, the past experience, the casualty count, the UNICEF is confirming it. Save the Children, they have also confirmed it. So it's virtually, they don't have to take sides of the Palestinians or the Israelis. So they are independent groups. So these independent groups also, actually, the figure that we are getting, about 11, nearly 12,000, is a very conservative figure.
Yes.
The actual figure is much, much more, because there are about nearly 3,500 bodies under the rubble. So so at the end of the war, only we will know, but we come to know that the real figures. In any war, it is the first casualty is truth.
Yes.
Yeah, and so that they use lies to promote diplomacy, to promote to you as a they use lies as a propaganda, as a tool in their propaganda wars. So it's both sides maybe exaggerating, or resorting to some kind of to win the world opinion. So they have to give their narrations, dramatizing it. But I would say that because when you look at this reporting from Al Jazeera, they have their reporters and journalists positioned within Gaza, and they are very, Al Jazeera is an international broadcasting television channel. It has adhered to journalistic ethics and the balance, giving the both sides of the story. So it's with quite different to their reporting is what you won't see in CNN or in BBC, you will be seeing in Al Jazeera.
And in fact, Israeli officials have said that some of the reporting from Al Jazeera is mirroring the Hamas propaganda as well. That's something that they have said many times.
That's
in
right.
the past.
Yeah, but that Al Jazeera has denied such allegations. Because Al Jazeera's track record is very straight and very because they are getting when you listen to as a journalist, when we analyze Al Jazeera reporting and the BBC reporting. That's, for instance, this morning, the BBC report which showed the shots of in the Al Shafa hospital. The babies from the incubators were being carried, and they were being shifted to another place in the hospital where they get electricity. They used the word, these are highly choreographed shots. So it shows these are dramatized. They are giving that impression to the viewers or the listeners. But whereas the Al Jazeera reporting is quite balanced, and they give the ground reality, and they are sourced. They are not commenting on. I mean, they are whatever when they are meant to make a claim, they are sourcing it to a particular place. I mean, saying whether it is Hamas or the doctors or the UN officials or the ICRC or whoever in the ground. Yeah.
So I think you may have seen many interviews recently about this conflict, and I think something that I would invite the audience to go to YouTube and check on any Israel-Palestine interview that's on Western media or independent media even. One of the first things that everyone is asked to do, especially when you're looking at the Palestinian perspective, or you're giving a Palestinian point of view, or you're speaking about something beyond the normal conversation around Israeli security, one of the first things the interviewee is asked to do is to condemn October 7th and the Hamas operations. So in that spirit, I will ask you whether you want to condemn the operations of Hamas on the October 7th as a good faith thing. You cannot condemn it, but what is your reasoning?
Yeah, civilian deaths, whether it is done by the Hamas or whether it is done by Israelis or whether it is done by the United States or any country, needs to be condemned.
100%.
Because civilians they are non-combatants. They don't take part in the war.
They're protected by Geneva Conventions.
Exactly. So, they are protected by the Geneva Conventions. They are protected by the United Nations resolutions. So many resolutions about the civilian. And this is killing civilians is part of it's a war crime.
Yes.
So by whoever done it, the October 7th, because uh, I want to also say that that actual figure the Israeli is quoting today is they have brought it down from 1,400 to 1,200 according to Haaretz newspaper.
Yes.
And this 1,200 of this 1,200, 300 are military officers, military
Yes. They
people.
have
So
military
that is
rank.
military rank. So that it's about you just leave 300 means there's about 900 civilians, and some of these 900 civilians died in the ensuing battle. It said the Israeli Apache helicopters were used, and they, in order to take on the Hamas militant, they've just fired, and people and the civilians also died. So we really don't know until a forensic investigation is done. We don't know how many civilians the Hamas killed and how many civilians died in the Israeli attacks on the Hamas. So it's this or the Hamas attack on
And
Israeli
in
troops.
that
Yes.
same spirit, Mr. Izzadeen, I want, because you're a journalist,
Yeah.
right? You've been a journalist your entire life. Will you also condemn Israel's killing of some 38 journalists, including, we mentioned Al Jazeera, the Al Jazeera station chief's entire family was murdered. Al Jazeera has lost dozens of journalists over the years, including in this battle. I give you the opportunity to also condemn Israeli attacks on. I think we can't say that they're targeting journalists, but certainly the outcome is that 30 plus, almost 40 journalists.
Actually, we can't. We should say that they are targeting civilians or journalists are civilians, right? They don't fight. They don't take arms, right? They report the truth. So when journalists are killed, when the UN, I mean, yes, about 2 days back, the United Nations in New York, the UN flag was flown at half mast in honor. In respect of. UN workers, UN staff who died in the Gaza in the Israeli attack. So this is actually, these attacks are deliberate attacks. These are not Hamas centers what they are being attacked. These are residential. The Palestinians have lost nearly about 170,000 residential units. So it's a crime, right? As a person, right? We in Sri Lanka, we know how much we spend, our lifetime savings that you spend to build a house or to buy a house, and suddenly one fine day you see it's gone into smithereens. And so this 170,000. So these are civilian targets, civilian areas, the markets, the hospitals, and the residential areas, and the bakeries, and desalination plants, and power grids. So the solar panels are being attacked. So it's they are making life really, these actually what we call collective punishment.
Yes.
Which is it's really a war crime, and it's a crime against humanity. So I really condemn that, the journalist killings that you say.
I wonder, as this conversation, it's been now over a month, it's been since October 7th, the calls for ceasefires have been so hard to come by. But we saw from Western leaders, Emmanuel Macron has been probably the first to directly use the word ceasefire and call for a ceasefire, and to mention that Israel need to take better precautions to prevent collateral damage. Do you see a further shift in other European centers, or how do we view this?
Well, there is some shift, like, say, for instance, individual politicians, the ministers, like, for instance, Belgium's deputy prime
Yes.
minister and the Spanish minister, they have spoken about, they have condemned Israel's attack on the Palestinians, and they are calling for a ceasefire. But very, very unfortunately, it's not come, such a call for ceasefire is still not coming from the United States or United Kingdom. They remain the staunchest ally of Israel. They have virtually given Israel the green light or carte blanche. They go and do whatever you want, and we will be there to protect you. That's the kind of signals the Americans are giving. But though they also talk about civilians casualties should be minimized, and it's really hypocrisy. So when a similar thing happened in 2 years in 2022 January or February, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, they called on this. It's an invasion is it's a wrong thing. It's under international law. Invasions are not tolerated. It's a crime. So, and then they said the Ukrainians have the right to bear arms to resist occupation. So, this right to bear arms and resist occupation, this right is denied to the Palestinians as far as the United States are concerned. But in international law, the right to, now we are talking about Israel has a right to defend itself. Certainly, every country has a right to defend itself. It's under international law. But every people who are under a military occupation has the right to resist and win freedom. It is so, there are about there are about scores of international covenants like Geneva Conventions and the UN resolutions which talk about the Palestinians' right to armed resistance, as long as this arms resistance is proportionate and to that to the military occupation. So that is a serious the international system is not really, the United States called for a rule-based international order, but whereas what we see is not a rule-based international order. If it is a rule-based international order, Israel should be, respecting the Geneva Conventions, the international call for international humanitarian laws. There's something called jus in bello in international humanitarian law. That means civilians should be protected, and they know unnecessary harm should not be inflicted on civilians. So these are issues, the international humanitarian laws and international human rights laws talk about. But these, so if you are calling for a rule-based order, the United States could preach that to China, to Russia, but when it comes to Israel, there's no such thing as the rule-based order, or it's actually it's real double standards and hypocrisy.